Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of I Bought a Watch. As always, please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and want to see more of this kind of content. It does actually help me out, I'm not just saying it, as it allows me to get more watches onto the channel, so please do consider it. So today we're going to be looking at this new Phylida AQUATERRA HOMAGE. We're coming up to the 11/11 AliExpress sale, so if you're looking for a great spec'd everyday piece, I really don't think you can do much better than this one. The basic structure of this review will be going through a bit of the background on the AQUATERRA itself. That is the Omega version. Now I did go through a little bit of the background of the 15,000 Gauss Omega in the Corgeut HOMAGE video. I'll leave a link to that video on screen now. However, the AQUATERRA is an absolute grail watch of mine, and any excuse to talk about it a little more, I will 100% take that opportunity. Next, I will go through some of the specifications, dimensions and such, cover some other things, and of course giving my opinions all the way throughout. And then I thought, instead of doing my usual reasons not to buy this watch, I'm going to be putting it head to head with that Corgeut that I mentioned before in a bit of a face off, so stay tuned for that if you're weighing up these two. Especially as I think the Corgeut is really the only other sensible AQUATERRA homage on the market at this price point, so do stay tuned for that. Alright, let's get into this review. So to start off with, I'm going to be covering a bit of history that this piece here is paying homage to. Now, I've got to be careful here as there's lots of copyright and channels getting taken down and whatever. So just to be clear, this is the history of the Omega AQUATERRA and not this watch here. Right, so the Omega Seamaster AQUATERRA. Aqua being water, Terra being land. This, in my opinion, aside from potentially the Rolex Explorer 1, is the perfect do everything, go anywhere kind of watch. A sporty, classy, versatile piece that really works, as its name suggests, everywhere on land and sea. I mean, really, they could have called this one the Aero AQUATERRA, as I'm sure it's not out of place in the air, but perhaps that name is just a bit too much of a mouthful. This is one of my absolute grail watches, and hopefully one day I can justify dropping the $5 and picking one of these up for myself. But until then, this Phylida at £76, which can easily fall below that £70 mark after coupons, and perhaps a little more during the 11/11 sale, really makes a rather compelling argument. Now, if this watch interests you at any point during the review, I have left a link to where you can go pick one of these up in the description. That will be an affiliate link, which basically means I get a little bit of commission at no extra cost to you guys, and that really helps me out as I can get more watches onto the channel for review. That being said, I would strongly suggest waiting until that November 11th sale, which is coming up soon, and it means that the watches will be slightly cheaper. But if you do wait, please do consider coming back to this video and using my affiliate link, as like I said, it really does help me out. Okay, so specifications wise, we have a diameter of 41mm, a lug-to-lug of 48mm. However, unfortunately, due to those protruding male end links, this brings the actual total to around 52mm, so slightly large. The lug width here is a nice accommodating 20mm, meaning you can easily swap out the straps on this one. These AQUATERRA homages really are strap monsters. I popped the Corgeut on this drab green NATO and was really surprised by how great it looked. Unfortunately, I'm away from a lot of my equipment, as I mentioned in my previous video, so I don't really have access to all my straps to do a full strap showcase. But I got contacted by a strap company recently, so look out for a mega strap showcase in a future video. Rounding off these dimensions is a case thickness, which is slightly large for a dressier sports piece of 13.5mm. I must say though, the curved lugs do an excellent job of slimming this one down, but we'll get onto that in a little bit. First, let's address the standout feature of this watch, and the part that immediately, in my opinion, makes it worth the cost, and that is the dial. Now, again, no credit to Phylida here design-wise, aside from perhaps the fact that they have pulled this off. There is a lot to appreciate here. To start with, let's talk about my favourite, the texture. First thing that stands out to you is this wonderful, what is called teak decking, green-black sunburst dial. I mean, this more or less steals the show for me. I love the look of this one. Applied to that dial are almost shark teeth applied indices, which again have utilized texture in such a brilliant way. Each index is topped with heavy brushing, with all beveled edges finished in a high polish. enhancing their contrast against that rich coloured dial. Skirting the wider edge of each index is a detailed printed minute track with Arabic numerals displaying the corresponding minutes. Again, with textures in mind, this is printed on a finely embossed concentric circled ringed portion, creating a nice clean cutoff with that centre portion of the dial. The handset here is well sized, with that hour hand extending to the tips of those hour markers, although I would have liked to see the arrow-headed minute and seconds hand elongated just a millimeter or two each, so they both extend towards that minute track just a tad more. It is also important to mention the loom. Although not too impressive, it does shine with an initial bright blue that dims a bit too quickly for my taste. However, I will mention the hands and indices do hang on for a considerably longer time than I expected due to such small application areas. So thumbs up there. Lastly, of course, is that 3 o'clock date window. The chevron-shaped date cutout allows you to take a look at that black date wheel. Now, although not perfectly color matched, for that I would have liked to seen a dark green perhaps. It really does a more than adequate job blending into the dial, and a far better job than the high contrasting white which is usually found on most AliExpress homages. Speaking of colors, this piece comes in 3 other colorways: a blue variant, a all black variant, and a grey variant with blue highlights. I did query the vendor, and all but the grey feature the black date wheel, so if mismatched date wheels irritates you, then I'd recommend the all black. Unfortunately, the pictures really don't do this piece justice, so I don't know whether those other versions feature the sunburst effect, whether the blue is more of a blue-black in a similar vein to this green. I think that that could potentially be a very tempting choice, but you would have to be willing to take the risk at a potential mismatch with that black date wheel. So I'll leave that choice up to you. Covering the dial, we have a beautifully domed sapphire crystal. However, unfortunately, due to a lack of AR, this makes the piece pick up a lot of flecto, and actually makes it really difficult to photograph and film. However, due to the clever use of texture and color choice, I don't find that this really affects legibility in person. It's just annoying to take photos of. While I'm out in the sunshine, let's take a moment to appreciate some of the case finishings. Phylida again pays homage to the AQUATERRA here, with those twisted lugs that create these beautifully crisp peaks that fold down towards that bracelet. The top of the inner portions are finished in a high polish with a longitudinal brushing that runs along the length of the case. The brushing is interrupted by a large, almost Phylida style crown at the 3 o'clock position. At first I was unsure about this aspect, and in my opinion it looked a little large and protruded a little too far. However, while wearing the watch over the past weeks, I've not noted any discomfort due to it. In fact, having the large crown means operating this NH35 inside is a joy. The crown unscrews nicely and features hand winding in that first position. This is actually quite enjoyable, as I said, thanks to that large size and grippy knurling on the crown. A distinct click into the second position, made slightly easier due to the crown's shape, allows you to change that date wheel. Then in the final position, this allows you to hack the movement and change the time. I'm sure by now most of you know the operating procedure of the NH35, just thought I'd cover it in case some of you were new and are unaware. As well as drawing your attention to, I feel like the crown is potentially cut 0.5 millimeter too short. So when you push the crown in, it doesn't always restart the movement. This is no fault of the movement, as I'm aware, and you just need to push the crown in a little more than you would usually to start up again. And then of course, screwing the crown back in is a very smooth operation. However, I will add, I would still like to have seen a signed crown to improve this piece. Flipping this one around, it shows you that workhorse NH35 movement that I mentioned earlier. A real known quantity movement that can be found in pieces ranging from £60 all the way up to 600. This is a very good movement choice, so I have to give Phylida their dues here. This is going to be a movement that is readily serviceable and will easily give you multiple years of use if you take moderate care of it. The case back itself is unsigned, however it does feature those scalloped edges that allow you to unscrew the crown and allow it to sit rather snugly on your wrist. Moving on to the bracelet, that for this Phylida and a couple other Phylidas, the bracelet is a weak point in my opinion. And I'll leave a link to that video on screen now. Now, people people in that video did suggest I give the watches some wrist time and perhaps soak them in some WD-40 to loosen them up, and it has greatly improved the wearability and comfort of the bracelet. The bracelet itself is actually a very solid construction. Solid end links, solid links, and a nice milled clasp. The bracelet uses the screw link system, which makes adjustment super easy. That is, of course, if you have the correct screwdriver. The clasp here is your typical butterfly clasp with double button deployment, where one side is friction locked and the other side folds over, securing that clasp nicely. The bracelet here does have also a minute taper from the 20mm at the lugs down to 18mm at the clasp, and it doesn't really change in thickness at all. However, I do still have some gripes about this bracelet. Those are, of course, those protruding male end links, which make this watch wear unnecessarily larger than it needs to be, in my opinion. And also, I find the butterfly clasp is a little too flat and a little too wide. Now, this might not be a problem for people with really large wrists, but for me, it doesn't quite conform to the wrist as much as I would like, meaning it gives your wrist this slightly boxy appearance. This, however, is amended in a certain other AQUATERRA HOMAGE bracelet that I just so happen to have with me here today as well. Which does lead me in a nice segue onto the comparison portion of this video. So, the way I plan on doing this is doing a typical chart comparison. I've seen it done in many videos, and I think it nicely lays out the pros and cons and structures a comparison on how I feel about these two pieces so that we can draw some meaningful conclusions. By all means, join me in rating these two pieces, and you know what? You can draw up your own chart and join me as I go through rating these along the way, because I'm sure, you know, a lot of this is subjective. It is just my opinion at the end of the day. So please let me know in the comments below your own results. I feel that could be kind of cool. Okay, so the categories I'm going to be choosing are dial, lume, crystal and crown, which I've lumped together, the movement choice, dimensions, finishing, the bracelet, and then of course rounding it off with the price. Now everything aside from the price, I've given a number from 1 to 10, as obviously the differences aren't as stark as giving one a point and not the other. Some of them are greater and some of them are much more narrow, and in some cases they kind of score the same. Okay, to start off with the dials. So for the dials, I've given the Phylida a 9 and the Corgeut a 5. Although I do love the Corgeut dial, I feel like it's pretty average. There's no sunburst effect, there is not any jewel finishing on those markers, and especially the standout feature is that date wheel is just white. That's not necessarily a problem. It does enable you to read it a little better, but I feel like the black date wheel on the Phylida, although as I mentioned before, it would have been nice to see a dark green, this just kind of stops it from achieving that top 10. In regards to kind of fluff and kind of specks of dirt under the dial, I haven't noticed any, so I'm rather happy with those scores. Next, I'm going to talk about lume. So the lume on the Phylida I've given a 5, and the lume on the Corgeut I've given a 4. Now, I've given the 5 as a kind of average grade, as I feel like the Phylida, although it really does impress me with its kind of the way it hangs on, it's still such a small application area. It's not going to be very legible in complete darkness, but it does help in kind of low light situations. The Corgeut, on the other hand, is kind of useless. You can see a little bit on the handset, but the lume on the markers is so small, and it's just kind of more of a gimmick. If you shine it under a torch, you might get an initial burst, but it's not going to help you in the long run. But yeah, either of these watches, I would not be suggesting you buy them if you're into your lume. Next, we're going to talk about the crystal and crown. Now, I've scored both of them the same here, but for different reasons, so they're both at a 7. So to start off with, both have sapphire crystal. The Phylida has a slightly domed sapphire crystal, where the Corgeut is completely flat. I don't really have a preference. I think the flat crystal picks up less flecto. Both don't feature any anti-reflective coating. And now in regards to the crown, the Phylida has that oversized, almost onion style crown, whereas the Corgeut has a much smaller crown. I do like the grip on the Phylida, but it's not recessed, which is definitely the case with the Corgeut. It is part recessed, as you can see here, and it offers that little bit of extra protection, which I do like. And I should probably mention they're both screw down. The movement choice here, I've given the Phylida an 8, and the Corgeut just a 4. So the Phylida has the Seiko NH35, a great workhorse movement. I've talked enough about it. I'm not going to prattle on. The Corgeut, however, features the Seagull ST16, I believe, or 17. It's kind of your standard run-of-the-mill date complication automatic movement. I've had it in loads of watches and it's not given me a problem so far. It's got a slightly gritty hand wind, but it does feature all the same things as the Phylida. It's got hacking, hand winding, so perhaps a 4 is a little harsh. Actually, you know what? I'm going to raise the Corgeut to a 5 because you do have the choice between this Seagull and the Miyota. I would always recommend choosing the Seagull as the Miyota, although a more known quantity doesn't feature the hacking as this movement does. Next, we're going to move on to dimensions. Now, here, this is the first time that the Phylida scores below the Corgeut, and that is because if you look at their side profiles, the Phylida is considerably thicker. Now, this is due to that case back that they've tried to homage the original AQUATERRA. I don't find that it wears too high on my wrist. It doesn't feel like a very bulky watch. However, I do notice that it is quite considerably thicker than the Corgeut. And considering they're both display case backs, it's kind of unfortunate to see that the Phylida is so much thicker. Now, I don't know the specifications off the top of my head. I kind of assume that the reason it's so much thicker is because of that NH35 movement, but I still wanted to draw your attention to it all the same. All their other dimensions are more or less the same. Next, we're going to move on to finishing. So, finishing here, I've given the points to the Phylida, so 8 points to the Phylida and 6 points to the Corgeut. I've only said this because the Phylida, I feel, is a little crisper. So those peaks on those twisted lugs are slightly, ever so slightly sharper. Not to the extent that it's kind of uncomfortable if you accidentally like press up against it, but it just feels like they got tighter regulations on all their machining. Again, the polishing here is a bit more distinct between that brushing and the polishing on the top of the case, and all in all it has a feel of a more refined, clear-cut product. So last off, I just want to talk about the bracelets. Now here I've given the Phylida a 5 and the Corgeut a 7, and that is largely because although the Phylida does have a strong bracelet construction and does use that easy to use screw link system, the Corgeut just pips it in 2 regards, and that is the end links and the clasp. Now, this seems to be a problem with a lot of budget watches and watches in general. It seems to be where a lot of companies cut corners. And in these 2 areas specifically, I feel like Corgeut has done a slightly better job than Phylida. In regards to the end links, Corgeut has used female end links, which cut down the size of this watch and make it far more wearable for small to medium-sized wrists. And in regards to the clasp, Phylida have done something strange here by making their clasp unusually long. Now, I don't know if it's just me, maybe I have particularly circular wrists, but this is probably one of the more important things to consider, especially if you're planning on wearing it on a bracelet. Okay, that kind of rounds up my great comparison, the review to end all reviews on AQUATERRA homages. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I really do enjoy reading them. This video has taken a bit of time, and if you're a regular viewer of the channel, you will have noticed that some of the setup has changed. That's because I'm currently, for the foreseeable future, away from a lot of my equipment, so the videos may change up a little bit. So I just ask for you guys to be a little patient and bear with me, and if you are new, please do like and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. We are edging towards that 1,000 mark. Please do come along, like and subscribe if you do like this kind of content, and I'll see you all again in the next episode. Bye!